Controlling blood glucose levels is probably the most straightforward part of homeostasis, and the GCSE offers plenty of marks which will make a big change in your final grade. So it is vital that you get full marks on questions like these to ensure you perform well on your paper and exam. So without further ado, let's get going. Remember, blood glucose levels of course just means the level of glucose in your blood. Remember, when we eat stuff like carbohydrates, our digestive system breaks them down into simple sugars called glucose. Additionally, glucose is found in some vegetables, fruits, potatoes, bread and rice. This is why when you chew bread in your mouth for a while, you'll begin tasting sugar. When someone eats these foods, the blood glucose levels in their body will eventually increase. However, glucose levels in the blood can drop to low levels as well. Therefore, it is vital to our survival that we can maintain the blood glucose levels as stable as possible. So how do we do this? Take the middle orange line to be the optimum blood glucose level. In the event that our blood glucose levels increase, receptors on the pancreas will detect an increase in blood glucose levels. Remember, the pancreas is part of the endocrine system and it is a vital gland. A gland secretes hormones, in other words, releases hormones. In this case, the pancreas is a gland which releases or secretes a hormone called insulin. Insulin has an overall effect in the body which causes glucoses to bond with other glucose molecules, forming a larger molecule called glycogen. Glycogen can be stored in the liver. Glucose will also be used in respiration. Remember, glucose is a requirement for respiration, so if we undergo respiration, we are using up glucose in the blood. Consequently, this will decrease blood glucose levels. In this case, once again the receptors on the pancreas must detect a decrease in blood glucose levels. The pancreas will then secrete a hormone called glucagon, not to be confused with glycogen. This is a part where students always mess up, so I'll talk about a way to remember this in the next slide. Glycogen will be converted into glucose in the liver and released into the blood. Respiration will be inhibited unless absolutely necessary. This will raise blood glucose levels, and the cycle will repeat and repeat and repeat until the day you depart this world. So, using this meme I posted on the Instagram a while back, I can help you remember the difference between glycogen and glucagon. Students always get confused with glycogen and glucagon. Remember, gluc is found in both glucagon and glucose. Therefore, glucagon makes glucose. Glucagon is a hormone, while glycogen is many glucose molecules bonded together. So the hormone is glucagon, not glycogen. Glycogen is many glucose molecules bonded together. Now, diabetes is heavily involved in blood glucose levels. It's important that diabetes is tackled because there can be serious complications. Diabetes, as you may know, is an illness when blood glucose levels are not controlled. Something called hyperglycemia, which is dangerously high blood glucose levels, can happen due to diabetes. Hyperglycemia can cause blindness, excessive vomiting, thirst, and rapid heartbeat. Let's get a table up. There are two medically recognized types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. The numbers are in Roman numerals. For GCSE, we need to know the causes, the relative ages of the affected, the effect on blood glucose levels, and treatments. Type 1 diabetes is a bad one because it can't really be prevented. This is because it's caused by genetic factors. The immune system is programmed to basically kill cells on the pancreas that secrete insulin. Of course, if we do this, insulin cannot be made. As this is mostly genetic, it's very common in children and young adults. Remember that insulin is a hormone which decreases blood glucose levels. Therefore, type 1 diabetes causes an overall increase in blood glucose levels. This can eventually lead on to hyperglycemia, which we already established is dangerously high blood glucose levels. For those who suffer from type 1 diabetes, doctors prescribe insulin injections, which essentially introduces artificially produced insulin into the body, and this helps patients decrease blood glucose levels. Also, patients are encouraged to avoid carbs and exercise regularly. How about type 2 diabetes then? Instead of type 2 diabetes being genetically caused like type 1 and therefore really unavoidable, type 2 can actually be avoided. Essentially what happens, the body becomes resistant to insulin. So although insulin is made, it does not trigger a decrease in blood glucose levels. This is because people eat so much unhealthy stuff, so much sugars and carbs, but the body basically can't respond to insulin anymore. This is why it is more common in adults and elderly people. Type 2 diabetes causes the exact same problems as type 1 diabetes does. We get an increase in blood glucose levels and eventually hyperglycemia. To tackle type 2 diabetes, doctors prescribe drugs such as metformin to tackle the resistance to insulin. Once again, patients will be encouraged to avoid carbs and regularly exercise just like they would in type 1 diabetes. That is all for theory. Now time for some topic questions. As always, assess it but don't guess it. Pause me, unpause when you're ready and we'll tackle it and handle it. This question is asking about what responds to blood glucose levels. Some students are tempted to say the brain because they think of the pituitary gland. But remember, the pancreas is a gland that has receptors to detect change and secrete the necessary hormones. Therefore, B for biology is correct. Choose it and cruise it. Final question for this lecture then, people. Take it slow so you glow. Once you're ready, we'll review it and screw it. As the pancreas is a gland, it releases hormones. So H for hell no and I for I know it's wrong are incorrect. Get rid of those as they are not hormones, they are sugars. So between insulin and glucagon, which is correct? Remember, glucagon makes glucose. Since blood glucose levels have increased and therefore we'd like to decrease blood glucose levels, G for gosh darn it cannot be correct. Therefore F for fantastic bombastic is correct. Insulin is the hormone responsible for decreasing blood glucose levels. Take it and bake it. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to do the following.